Today on Adversity Strength, I'm joined by Todd Malloy. Raised in a low-income housing project by a single mother, Todd learned from an early age what it meant to take on responsibility, survive difficult circumstances, and keep moving forward no matter what. Like many people who appear successful on the outside, he followed the path that seemed safe, building a career in engineering, corporate project management, while quietly feeling disconnected from who he really was. Eventually, that inner conflict became impossible to ignore. Todd made the courageous decision to leave behind certainty and pursue a career helping others better understand themselves, their emotions, and their stories that shape their lives. In this episode, we explore survival mode, emotional fitness, burnout, identity resilience, relationships, and the hidden cost of being high functioning while struggling internally. We also discuss why so many people learn to survive life but never truly learn how to live it. This is a thoughtful and honest conversation about self awareness, healing, personal growth, and finding the courage to build a life that feels authentic and meaningful. Todd, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Lee, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the introduction. That was very thorough.
You've done a lot of things. There's a lot of things that need to be included. It's been an eventful life for you. Yeah, take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start for yourself?
Lee, my journey started when I was 5 years old, and at 5, my father decided to leave our family, leave his wife and 2 sons. And I got to speak from my mother. Your father's gone. You're the man of the house. When the bill collectors call, this is what I want you to say, and you have the responsibility of helping me support your brother. So right there
And
in that moment, unbeknownst to me, that eradicated or wiped away any future childhood because
Joe,
immediately here it was, I'm a 5-year-old kid and now have to understand what a grown man size 12 shoe has to deal with and having no frame of reference. So
yeah,
throughout life and dealing with my mother, I've grown to have a lot of empathy for my mother because growing up in a very oppressive environment, single parent female head of household with few resources, limited resources. We started off on welfare because my mother had a ninth grade education. So I saw my mother get a GED. I saw her progress through life and get an associate's degree in college and do those types of things while I was moving and so forth. But in that responsibility, kind of that you're unaware of, doesn't allow you to see life through see life through a child's view. You see it through responsibility, accountability, and really created for me personally a mindset of just survival. Life has nothing to do with good or bad. It has to do with situations that have to be dealt with. For a long time, I felt as though the life that was evolving for me was really like trapping me. It's like I was being weaved into some tapestry that I could not control. However, but as I began to get older and understand some things differently, my mother did something for us when I was about 9 years old that really shaped the course of my rest of my life. My mother had very limited means, but one year she took us to Coney Island, New York.
yeah,
Coney Island, New York, before there was Disney World and so forth, Coney Island, New York had an amusement park. So we took the train from Connecticut to New York. My brother and I had never been on a train before. We're excited. She brings us to a hotel. Don't know the hotel, of course, but we had adjoining rooms. So all of a sudden, we have the 2 hotel rooms and my brother and I are running through it and running through the hall and we went on the rides and we ordered room service. And my mother said, the reason I took you on this trip is that I don't want you to think that life is limited. I want you to understand that life is bigger than the 6 blocks or the neighborhood you live in. For me, that charted a course for the rest of my life because what I did was I began to challenge the experience I was having and really look for that there had to be more to life. So in that created in me a stir, a commitment to challenge myself, that not to limit myself to what I was seeing, but to want more. So in that, you stumble because throughout life, I had the responsibility of caring for my brother. So at 5, I'm walking my brother to the bus, making sure he's prepared to go to whatever care he needs to go to. I make sure I get on the bus, school bus, then get off the school bus. I was the latchkey kid. I had the key tied around my neck, tucked under my shirt so I wouldn't lose it. Come home, make sure my brother got off the bus, take him in the house, do whatever chores, make him lunch, do all of those things. And that was my routine, even to the standpoint of being 12 years old, having to go to work because you have to facilitate money in the house, but also just for your own self. You wanted things. So therefore it had to work. So what you learn, if nothing else, is resilience. Because one key, another thing my mother taught. So no matter what the despair is, if you're really paying attention, there are nuggets being placed
Yeah.
in that tapestry that now you can build from. Because in the midst of those types of situations, she also taught me that a key to life is learning to adapt. I know to modern day times, acceptance and accountability are cuss words.
Yes.
However, when I grew up, accountability and acceptance were necessary for survival because no
Yeah.
matter what system you're in, you're a part of that system. And if you change one part of the system, you change the whole system. However, but if you never see yourself accountable or accepting of a situation, how do you ever get to a real place or how do you find joy? Because the moment you don't want to accept accountability, you're actually saying, I am powerless because I have to have some skin in the game to change it. Because if I don't
Yeah.
have any inclusion in the system or accountability in the system, I can't change it. So for my resilience and coping skills, accountability and acceptance, accepting what is, whether I liked it or not. But once I understand what it is, I have the power to change it. For example, I'm in North Carolina. Kitty Hawk is big in North Carolina. Why? Because that's where the Wright brothers created the plane. What they had to accept that there's such a thing as gravity. Now, how do we overcome it? But if I don't accept gravity, I'll never be able to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
So in life, I learned that to look at situations and glean from them, that tapestry that seemed to be a trap also left nuggets to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
It also taught me that when, I'm 8 years old being solicited to run numbers. Run numbers is gambling. Before they
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
legalized gambling, run numbers. And as you're going through those things, making life choices and decisions, you had to learn how to trust your inner self to kind of say, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. And look at the consequences because I had already came from a distressed situation. I really didn't want to add any more distress to it. I wanted to actually be a solution because I recognize this can't be, in my mind, this can't be sane. This can't be normal. There has to be something else other than despair. So
Yeah.
that caused me to challenge myself to pursue other opportunities, even like when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was in a public school and I was considered a bright kid. So they put me in what is called the Higher Horizon program. But then basically, we're in the same school as everyone else. However, you're quadrant off to certain rooms. However, but while you're learning, the kids that aren't in that program are banging on the door. There's all kinds of confusion going on in the room, hindering the learning process. So I go to my mother and I say, hey, I was a freshman in high school, about 14. I said, hey, I got to get out of this school because if I don't, I'm going to be consumed by the environment. I was at a point in my life where I was just like, it's either adjust to the truth of now or position myself to have something greater. And in turn, I said to my mother, I said, hey, I need to get out of here. I need to find another school. So in turn, I found a private Catholic school to go to. I went to work. I facilitated supporting the expense. And that began the journey of allowing me really to build a platform to understand my academic ability, but also be able to challenge myself to know what I wanted to do. Even when I was a kid, I wanted to be a solution to society, not a problem. And then while I was in school, my senior year, they said, hey, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a psychiatrist. Now, back then, coming from where I come from, looking like I look, everybody looked at you like, that's not a possibility. We don't do that. However, I was the unicorn in the family. So I had the opportunity to go to spend a day at the University of Connecticut Medical
Yeah.
School. And I walked through, there was a young man, an intern looking like Clark Kent leading us through the parade.
Yeah.
And I touched cadavers. I was excited. I was in front of the class. I mean, I was in front walking next to him and he turned back and he looked at me and he said, hey, what is it that you want to be? I said, I want to be a psychiatrist. And he said, you have 12 more years of school. And I dropped my head because at that moment I said, I don't have the money to pay for 12 years. Or having no idea about student loans and ways to finance college. All I knew is my mother had no money, my father had no interest.
Yeah.
So in turn, I dropped my head and I said, I can't have what I want. However, I'm good at math and science because I don't have 12, I can't think of 12 years worth of money. but let me go to, I'll tell you what, I'm good at math. I'm good at science. My father was uncle, excuse me. My uncle was a draftsman in an engineering company. He always said you should become an engineer because I was good at math and science. So in turn, I went and became a mechanical engineer. And then, but the sad thing, because the joke ended up being on me, I went to go get a 4-year degree because I thought I could do 4 years and come up with money. But it turned in, it took to a 10-year journey to get a 4-year degree. And then by the time I graduated in tears, saying I became successful at what I didn't want to do. But if I
Yeah.
actually took 10 years to do this, I could have figured out 12 years how to do what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
So in that created a lot of internal conflict and so forth, but you make the best out of a bad situation. However, I went on through engineering, being able to do some good work, be able to provide for my family, get married, do all of those things. However, there came a point in life where I was challenged by a mentor of mine who said, will your life matter? How will you know your life's mattered? And when you live, will it impact others? And I took it as a challenge. And I sat there and I said, if I design any more cell phones, hybrid electric technology, composite boom trucks, what does it matter? I want to impact lives. So in turn, I'm trying to survive and trying to figure things out. So I begin to explore myself as a person. Who am I really, and what is it that I really want to be? So I began that exploration by first starting to get involved in church and just searching God in varying ways. I come from a Christian family, but during that time I explored Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Islamic traditions, things of that nature, just to figure out who I was and find my
Yeah.
way through exploring life. And then as I began to explore that, I said, hey, Todd, instead of doing all the things you're doing, and it's great that you're finding yourself, but who are you and what is it you want to do? And in the midst of that journey, I actually went back to my first love. Why don't you give yourself permission to be who you actually want to be? The therapist that helps people change their lives and live a life worth celebrating. So in turn, after that, I in my journey going through ministry and so forth, because I settled back into my Christian faith. I went through ministry, went to seminary school while being an engineer and a family. Went to seminary school. I pastored a senior pastor at a church, at 7 years as a church. But then I noticed that even as I was there, something was missing for me. Something was missing for me because even in the midst of my teaching, I was talking about psychological mindsets. I was talking about a lot more than just what was confined or explained in the book, but I was making parallels to the point where I actually gave myself permission to live my truth and actually give myself permission to be the therapist I want to be. So I actually took a sabbatical and resigned from being a pastor and left seminary school and went to a, a graduate therapy school here in town.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I have an engineering degree, but I want to be a psychologist and a therapist. And they said, well, if you can maintain the grade, you can stay. We'll let you in. And took the chance and really gave myself an opportunity to really begin to, at 42, really allow myself permission to be the person I was on the inside that wasn't manifesting outward. Because up to
Yeah.
that point, I never really felt whole. I never felt accepted. I never found my tribe. I was just kind of a person moving through life, but really not connected to what's going on around me.
I think the mindset you've had, I mean, where do you think
Hmm.
that comes from? Because it's an unbelievable mindset. It's kind of one that you almost shouldn't have due to your
Right.
circumstances.
Hmm.
How many, especially if you're a kid involved in numbers, so you
Hmm.
could go off in any direction for the worst there as well. Was there any strong male role model, or were you having to
Well,
figure it out on
that,
your own?
and in that particular case,
Yeah.
from that perspective, there was one anchor I always had, one consistent anchor. That
Right.
was my Uncle Joe. My Uncle Joe that was the draft.
Yeah.
He was married to Miss San Juan. There was a Latin American pageant in my town where I lived, and she was the winner and a gorgeous woman, and he married her.
Yeah.
And he made it a point to be as close to me and keep me close to him. But when he remodeled houses, he would say, "Come on, let's remodel houses and learn how to strip floors down, lay laminate floors, or do whatever just to do." He helped me. Actually, he even helped me with a Volkswagen that I bought that had rotted out and used sheet metal and pop rivets to put it back together and so forth. So I'd have something to drive while I was in
Right.
college. He was probably the one anchor that I had, seeing him living
Yeah.
life differently, that at least was a visualization of something I wanted to have that wasn't available to me. Now it's
Yeah.
just really about figuring it out. But think about this though, as you're going through life and you're having experiences, you're also learning. You're learning what feels good, what doesn't feel good. You're learning what you do well, you're learning what you don't. And as opposed to focusing on the despair and what I don't do well, I chose to keep it positive. How can I change my circumstances? Because I had this drive, and I don't know where it comes from, and I just have to say it's God. Because even though I've done a lot of things that may not be perfect,
Yeah.
I don't know for a better word. When I got to a point where I was veering to the left or the right, I always knew when to stop. There was something in me that said, "You go one more step further, there's no return."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was my fear. Because real to be totally honest with you, and I don't know if this is right to say on the show, but I didn't want to
That's
be
fair.
considered in my mind another nigga on the block about to go to a penitentiary.
Yeah.
I did not want that for myself. When I grew up, the penitentiary was called Gladiator School. I
Yeah.
didn't think I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to go to Gladiator School to prove I was a man.
Yeah, and that's the it's just, yeah, and that's the last thing you want to be doing is going there because
Exactly.
who you're proving it to. It sounds to me like you've just got whether it's genetics or you've got that inner strength, that self value that a lot of people don't have, and you could have easily not had it. It sounds like that
Hmm.
your uncle's a real strong role model there for you as a
Oh yeah,
therapist.
very,
It's
very,
so
very much
important,
so. He was
and you had
he
that.
was the anchor.
Yeah, and it makes all the difference there.
Mhm.
And so to have that and the self-worth there as well, do you think that's what got you through not making really bad choices and keeping you on like the so
Exactly. Yeah, 'cause my uncle seemed to be very perfect. My uncle seemed
yeah,
he's in the military, had a military discipline. However, but his life looked different than everybody else's. So if I'm going to mimic something, it's not
yeah,
what I was being exposed to. Let me mimic what I saw and what I gravitated to, something that actually felt better for me as opposed to something
yeah.
that was tormenting.
And with the I'm guessing with the environment you're in, you were seeing other people similar
Oh, very much.
circumstances of you, but the
Oh
difference
yeah,
is the cops
no
are
doubt.
turning up, they're
Right.
disappearing. Yeah,
Right. For example, you have fathers that are present and not present at the same time, fathers that weren't present. There's varying violence, varying a lot of things. But at the same time, there were moments of civility. There were moments of joy and celebration. However, even though they were fleeting, you hold on to those moments.
yeah,
We used to have, what was it? There used to be a show on TV on Friday nights, no matter what was going on Friday and Saturday night while the adults were playing big wigs and cards, games, and maybe gambling a little bit and drinking. What they would do is there was a show called Creature Feature on television where the Gila monster would come out of the water and do all peculiar things. So those were for the kids to go in the room. They would give us pizza, let us sit in front of the TV. The adults be doing what they're doing. The children would be doing what they do. Those moments of created a balance, whether in my mind, because no matter what happened, there were moments in time where you recognize you could breathe. Between those moments, between seeing my uncle and then the recognizing that no one's going to come save me, I have to do it myself.
yeah.
I've merged all of that together to figure out how to be me.
How old were
Be-
you when you realized nobody was coming to save you? Because a lot of people
Oh,
were figuring it out in their 40s.
well, well, I figured it out, and be totally honest, when I went to college. When I was going to college, I graduated fairly with decent grades. Excuse me, I got accepted to Morehouse College, but my mother, who at the time had never done those types of things, didn't know how to help me fill out the paperwork and wouldn't support me in financial aid information. So in turn, when I lost out on being able to go to Morehouse as a result of that. So in turn, I went to a college, a predominantly Caucasian school that was on the other side of the fence. In the U.S., we have the train track. You have the good
Yeah,
side and the bad side.
yeah,
So I lived on what would be considered the bad side. There was a train track and a tall fence that I had to jump over to get to what we call here in the United States, predominantly white institution, PWI. However, I went there and I'm at the time I'm 6'5" and very muscular because I was benching a whole lot back then. I went there and I said, "Hey, I want to go to college. This is my situation." I explained to them what happened. And I said, "Look, I need your help because if you don't help me, you'll have to feed me in the middle of the night because I have no other option." And in turn, they said they looked at me and helped me get in college, helped me and actually accepted me in the school. They helped me find money. I got scholarships from industries and businesses that were supporting the school to get me started in college. And in that
How'd that
moment,
feel?
first of all, it's very humbling. But what other choice
But
do I have? Because it was either the penitentiary or
but
do
when you
something different.
but when you've got people that's because it sounds like you've almost had to do everything on your own. Yeah. Didn't it?
Well, what it is I gleaned from the environment around me.
Yeah.
And I took what worked for me and I didn't do what didn't work for me. Because I
Yeah.
had enough examples of chaos. I had enough examples of fighting. I had enough examples of some positive things too. But I could fester in what I didn't have. I could
Yeah.
fester in focusing on why my father wasn't around to help and do all of these other things. Or I can actually do something that I can control or something that would at least give me some peace of mind. Because again, the biggest warfare we ever really have is the warfare in your mind.
Always.
Right. So I had to figure out a way to silence the noise in order to breathe and be because the last thing I wanted to do is in the neighborhood I came from be dead by the time I was 25. That wasn't an option.
Were you aware at that time, I'm kind of guessing so, that
Hmm.
in that environment, if you go down that road, this is pretty
Hmm.
much what's gonna happen to you? Do you think
Oh yeah.
that's a big part that is like
Oh yeah,
bringing you
no
out that
doubt.
way?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no doubt. Because there were when I was think about this. When I was about 14 and 15, I had classmates going to prison for murder.
yeah,
So it's
uh,
kind of obvious, go that route, what
yeah.
happened. It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a shock. Remember, I grew up in a time where when we learned, as a young man, when I learned how to drive, being African American, we were always taught to drive at night. Hey, anything speeding up behind you and coming close to you, trying to hit you, is the police because what they do is cause you to speed up. And then, however, so when the police come, put your hands up, don't touch anything, don't move, don't do all of these things. So as a learning driver, you have to learn how to ride tactically, how to be able to save your own life because of even in the US, we're changing politics here somehow and we're reverting back to times when I was a kid and before. But some of the things that we're talking about now were happening. They weren't televised when I was a kid. They're just more televised now. But I was being raised for warfare. I was raised to survive, and just from a standpoint to some degree, and God forgive me, but it's almost like a cockroach. You can't kill them. They just always show up. So it was
Yeah.
that it was the survival method of I can't let the world eat me. I can't let the world destroy me.
It
I'm built for more than what I'm
Yeah,
experiencing.
but, it's insane to think that you have to go through
Mhm.
that, and it sounds like the start of Mississippi Burning. That's what it
Yeah,
sounds like. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
and to have, like, in the UK, right, mirrors, signal maneuvers, that's it. But for yourself and obviously other people similar to yourself at that time, they're teaching you how to not get what? Shot by being in the
Well,
car?
well,
Crazy.
let's put it this way. What it does is make you face your fears. For example, I'll give you a real example. And it's the foolishness of youth. When I was a senior in high school, I just loved this young lady, and we're dating, we're doing those things, but there was another guy that liked her, and he was pursuing her, and then but however, I recognized this guy was already dating, so I shared with the young lady that I was interested in. He might be pursuing you, but let me share with you, he's already dating someone else, and in turn, he said that he was a few years older than me and he said that he shared with her he was going to shoot me. So I recognized this guy carried a gun, but I don't run fast. I was always a fighter because I had
Yeah,
to be. Because in my
yeah.
home, you can't come home crying. Because if you come home crying, you get beat up. So if you don't win out on the street, you got to fight at home. So I was a fighter. So I didn't run fast. And I'm not going to wait for somebody to sneak up on me. So I said, if he has the gun, he wants to shoot me. I'm just going to go meet him and give him that opportunity. But I believed I could get to him before he can get to me. Because if I wait for him to get me, I'm a victim. But if I show up on him
Yeah,
unexpectedly, I'm in a power position.
yeah,
So,
preemptive.
but what it is that when you're in those oppressive situations, you have to learn how to face fear because fear is a predominant energy, feeling, motion. And if you don't overcome it, you're stuck. You you won't survive.
Oh, it affects everything. Yeah.
So those things, facing fear just as a result of the environment that I grew up in, the situation that I grew up in, you had to face fear. And what you do, that statement my mother said, the key to life is learning how to adapt. Okay, this situation isn't working the way that I want. What shifts, changes, mindset changes, me moving to the left, moving to the right might make this better. And as I go, and fortunately, and it still happens today, when I hear information, even as a kid, I absorbed it as a sponge. So, and I very seldom forget anything. And that
Yeah.
comes through, and I've learned that as you're a therapist, the trauma of emotional neglect. You make the outside environment more important than what's going on inside of you. That makes you hyper vigilant to pay attention to every
Yeah.
detail in the world. But now what I did was what was birthed out of dysfunction, I actually took to use it as a superpower. Because as I learned, as I glean the data and as I process the data, and if I don't forget it, then I can utilize that in the next situation and the next situation and the next situation. Because now I'm learning, hey, I've been in similar situations like this. Let me go through the Rolodex and kind of weave my way. Not that it's going to be perfect. You still bump your head, stumble, and fall. But that drive of survival makes you pick back up. And then after you surviving, but then you say, I'm surviving, but now I got to learn how to thrive. So now how do you take the superpowers that were birthed through adversity and now make them work for you as opposed to you being a victim to them? And that's where I I I could understand why my mother took me to Coney Island, that there's more to life and the coping skills of
Yeah.
resilience. So now, as opposed to me running, here it is. I used to think that I was running from monsters and demons that were trying to keep me back. But as opposed, but then there came a point early in my life, mid 20s, early 30s, where I said, instead of running from something, why don't I run to something? Because when
Yeah.
I run from something, that's fear. When I'm being drawn to something, that's empowerment. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
with that empowerment, it was much more attractive. It made me want something more. So now how can I create it? And that's where you start giving yourself permission to leave yourself on the inside, not just to survive, but now let me convert it so now I can thrive and really create an
Yeah.
environment. Instead of being subject to what's going on around you, you have the power to create an environment that you can thrive in and then build from there, which facilitated me being the engineer, which facilitated me going to seminary school, which facilitated me becoming a therapist, which facilitated me getting advanced studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, becoming a professor to the top 1, 2% of the country, and having a private therapeutic practice and being able to put all of those experiences together to be a
Yeah.
benefit and asset to others. So people actually glean from my life's experiences academically and experientially, such that now that I've actually been able to achieve my goal, my dream of a kid of being the therapist that I've wanted to be, and now I can facilitate that and support through others, which now makes my history or my testimony not of shame and pain, but of power and glory.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know yourself with therapists, most therapists have been through their own traumas. That's what
Right.
it is.
Right, exactly, because you gotta deprogram all the things that were in your mind before.
Yeah.
And to your point, a lot of therapists, and I have clients as therapists, we've all been to have testimonies. We all have hard
Yeah.
stories, but it's through our own survival that motivates us not to want anybody else to go through what we've gone through or feel what we felt. Because to be in that dark place is tormenting.
Yeah, and like I become a therapist because my sort of the short version I give is I wanted to
Mhm.
be there for other people when nobody was there for me.
Exactly.
Um,
I actually said that. I was doing in the midst of my clinicals, getting my master's. I did substance abuse counseling in a in a Salvation Army crisis center where they had prison inmates that got out of prison or drug addicts that were in a 12-month program. And they now when people see me, they don't recognize I come from where I come from.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
other thing. So when I was there, they said, "Why are you here?" And I really had no answer. And I wasn't expecting that question. So they said, "Why are you here?" And I got really quiet, and an answer came out of it. And it said, "Because nobody came to save me." And I don't
Yeah.
want you to have that same experience.
Yeah. And you would have had it yourself with clients, and I've
Mhm.
had it where they've gone, Lee, you're the only person I have got or can come to there, and I'm just like a therapist there as well. And I always play it down or anything, but it's not until like you're sat there and you're not working, that you reflect over it and go, do you know what?
Oh,
Some of the
yeah.
things I actually set out to do, I've actually accomplished. I've actually been there for that person, and I've had it a few times where clients have said
Mhm.
to me, Lee, I don't think I'll be here today if it wasn't for you. You know, again, I play it down,
Amen.
but you
Amen.
know,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah,
Because again, your story, your challenges, your pain doesn't have to be for naught. It can
mm,
be for the benefit of others. I look at it, I call it fertilizer for you to grow.
yeah,
And as you're moving through life, you begin to rewrite the story that you lived, even though the pains are there. But now you
yeah,
understand I've lived long enough for it to make sense. But if I didn't give myself,
yeah,
and our truth be told, there were times I wanted to take my own life during those periods. But if I had, I would not have experienced the life I have now. I wouldn't have the joys. I wouldn't have people coming to me and saying how I've changed their lives and how they're living a
yeah.
life worth celebrating. So I would have missed out on a lot. So I'm glad that I weathered through what I weathered. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I have no shame associated to it because I like who I've become.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It shapes us, and you've enhanced it. You could
Mhm.
have done the opposite, as you know, but you've enhanced it.
Correct.
How
Correct.
did you feel when you're 42 years of age and then you're studying to become a therapist?
Mhm.
Did you feel that this is my calling here or here, and I'm doing it, or did you feel under pressure that you need to achieve it? Because I felt I'd gone from sales
Well,
and I thought I've got to do this, but also for the first time ever, felt I'm doing something I actually really want to do. First time ever.
yeah, no, and I had the same experience. There was I was being pressured by life but not being happy. I
Yeah.
was happy outwardly. It looked like, hey, if you get a US patent for the I-1000 phone, and yeah, everybody thinks you're a superstar, and you got an engineering degree, and you got the nice car, you got the nice house, but inside you feel like an
Yeah.
imposter.
Yeah.
And then I said, and it was funny. My children, I was looking at my children. My children were being rebellious teenagers, like most teenagers could be. They weren't doing anything other than just being their age. But I recognized that what I thought when my children were being rude, they weren't being rude. Actually, they were being, and in my mind, I said that they're actually being the children you raised them to be. But then I recognized I raised them not to be me, and I was the hypocrite because I raised them to be free. I raised them to have a voice. I
Yeah.
raised them to all of the things that didn't happen for me. I
Yeah.
offered to them.
Yeah.
But then I said, hey, if you can give it to them, you can give it to yourself. So even though I was in an oppressed state and I needed to do something, and that was an awakening that I could give myself permission at 42 years old to still pursue and become that therapist that I wanted to be. And that's why it took me 7 years to work full time, go to graduate school full time, and do the clinicals and be in manufacturing and raise a family. It took me 7 years, but then that's actually when I consider myself being born. I said, I was born at 49 because that was the first time that I'm prepared and to build a life on my own terms. And that was an exciting moment. It were dark times because in the midst of going all of the things I had to do to encourage that there were times I lived on 5-hour energy drinks for about a year. Yeah, but it shut my endocrine system down. And then I had to took another year to get myself back healthy again. I had to see
Cool.
three doctors once a week almost for a year. However, because it was fatigue, energy fatigue, or whatever it was, I had pushed myself so far
Yeah.
that my body was having a hard time recovering.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I accomplished the goal and have a much healthier regimen now as a result of it. But I have no regret. And what it is that now I see all of the things that I've shared with you as a superpower because, think about this. Once you've already beat hell, what are you afraid of?
Yeah, definitely. And I find when you face, like you said about turning around and facing your fears there, it's so powerful to do it. It takes a lot for a lot of people. When you do it, a lot of the fears and they disappear. They're not even there.
Yeah, I was taught something spiritually. There's a
And
famous bishop.
gain that power, it allows you to, yeah,
Yeah, no, in the midst of my spiritual journey, there's a national powerful pastor in this country called Bishop Jakes, T.D. Jakes. I had the opportunity to sit in a service. He preached at our church one Sunday, and he said the biggest enemy we have is the enemy in me, the enemy we have inside of ourselves. And once we're willing to face that demon, everything else is easy. So I had challenging moments through my spiritual journey to actually look inside as opposed to looking always outside. And so that supported me in my own journey and my own belief. And now hearing it from the outside, confirming what was going on inside of me, facilitated me more facing my fears even the more. And I made it as simple as when the first time I lived next to a lake and I got snakes in my backyard. I don't want snakes and I don't like snakes. I'm scared of snakes. However, but here it is. How you gonna run from a snake when you got little kids? You got three small children and a wife, and I'm the grown man supposed to protect, and I'm running for cover. So I had this. I said, "Hey Todd, you can't
Yeah.
run from this. This is your role, your position, your provider, your protector." And some of these snakes are copperheads. So I just learned how to go buy a hoe from a department store and learn how to face the snake. But I didn't just do that literally just in life, but I also did it spiritually, emotionally. I applied the same mindset. As I was in corporate America, they talk about Six Sigma, continuous improvement, main initiative, which you guys do started before us in the UK. But when I understood that concept when I was working at GE, I actually began in the 90s applying that to my own personal life because anytime that I felt I came short or didn't feel as though I could meet the grade, I would beat myself up. Oh my goodness. All of the education is still not perfect. It's still not perfect. But then in that lean initiative, they look for opportunities for error. They look for the flaws. They look for the
Yeah.
defects. Why do they do it? So that we could minimize them so we can make more money. So I said, I'm going to adopt that same concept. So instead of beating myself when I find flaws, why don't I challenge myself to grow through them and benefit so that I
Yeah.
can actually be the person I want? So this is where environmentally, I'm just ad hocing and just putting things together that will facilitate the mindset, the drive that's going on inside of me so I can figure this out. It's a Frankenstein approach. But I've made it through. And for that, I have to be grateful.
Yeah. It's a great approach. And I'm a big fan of getting things wrong and failing because you learn
Mhm.
so much more from it. Yourself,
Exactly.
sometimes you
Exactly.
can succeed at
Hmm.
something,
You know,
but and you don't know how you got there.
exactly. But to your point, I understand, and I've said this in my office. I've come to understand there's no such thing as failure.
Keep on going.
Yeah, no, no, for example, there's a product in the U.S. called 409. It's a cleaning product, been around longer than me. And it's called Formula 409. Why? Because there were 408 experiments before they found the 409th one that worked. It wasn't 408 failures. What it was, it took 408 opportunities to get to the
To
right
get to
solution.
yeah,
The right solution. So what it is life is only about experiences that create feelings and emotions. We choose to get stuck in them or learn through them to achieve destiny, purpose, and passion.
yeah,
Everything we do is a lesson. And now from that lesson, how are we going to build and grow? So as opposed to looking at it as good or bad, look at life as a student and look at life as your laboratory. And let me collect data. Now, how do I manipulate the data so I get my best experience? Think about this as a light. A light requires positive and negative current. It doesn't judge it. It just accepts all of the data that's coming. Now it runs through its circuitry and it understands the data. It discards what it doesn't need. It understands its purpose and meaning. And then it says emanate light in that direction. What if we as people did the same thing? Instead of judging life and good or bad, and I want all the good stuff, I don't want the bad stuff, I should look at life as all data. And as I have that data, now how can I manipulate the data to achieve my goal? So in
yeah,
Hamlet says there's no such thing as good or bad. Good or bad are the constructs of my good or bad are constructs of the mind. It only is what it is. So once I understand the is, and if my is isn't what I want it to be, what steps do I need to make that my is can be better?
yeah. And with yourself now, it's like you're so invested in yourself as a therapist and what you're doing there as well. How many years you've been doing it now?
Well, and I've been in private practice 15 years. However,
Yeah,
but prior to this, I spent probably 15 years in pastoral care ministry counseling people
yeah,
from a spiritual perspective. And what it is, I just took off my collar and did it
Sure.
from a mental health perspective.
Because you got so much passion and knowledge and experience. What's the future looking like for you? What do you think
Well,
you've got lined up there?
well, it's just to do what I'm doing in a more excellent manner and making products and services available to more people. I hope to do some national speaking. I create products to help people find themselves as I've explored and figured myself out. I've created games, card games, and different things, discussion cards to foster healthy communication. But you also peering in yourself. For example, in the continuous improvement that we talked about, it's the 5 whys. The 5 whys allow you to identify the root cause to a problem.
Yeah.
It gets you past the symptoms and gets you to the root cause. But when we begin to challenge ourselves, we should be asking why we think what we think. But if
Yeah.
we ask ourselves why we think what we want 5 times, we actually recognize whether it's relevant for us or not. For example, I have quite a few men coming in to me looking for me to help them find emotional security because they feel insecure or inadequate as men. And the first moment I asked them, I said, "Where did you get your definition of manhood?" They'll say, "From my father, from my grandfather, from on TV." I said, "Well, I don't know how fair that is because
Yeah.
all the people that taught you lived in the past. You live in the future. You live in the future. So
Yeah.
therefore, you have different erogenous zones. You have different socioeconomic situations. You have different wants and different desires." I said, and then I come back and say, "I know how you're 100% man." They say, "How did you know this?" I said, "Sir, do you work?" He said, "Yes." "Do you bring your spoils home?" He said, "Yes." "You contribute to the household success?" "Yes." "Do you love your wife, kids, and tell you care?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Because you do it every day. You're relevant to your situation.
Yeah.
Manhood and how you define yourself is not based on somebody else's standard. It's based
That's
on the
right.
truth of where you live and what's going on. So if I only have a house that costs $10, I don't need a view. But if I'm managing at 10 and I'm happy, then the Stugats to
Yeah.
the rest of
Of
the
course.
world. But we have to define things based on the truth of our experience, who we are and what we want, as opposed to trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And too often times we spend more life trying to compare ourselves to others or mimic where we didn't have any control or power and ignore where we have the utmost power and control in our present moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think with the whole manhood thing, I think any guy speaking to you will kind of automatically feel drawn to you, and they're going to listen to what you say, just your experience, the way you are, come across, and all the knowledge that you've got. Because a lot of people don't. And I had a guy, American guy. He used to work in prisons, and he was a prisoner, and he worked, and he's now helping predominantly African American guys learn how to be like a better father, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And they go into the prisons and
Mhm.
really lovely guy, Mark Ross, his name was, because they didn't know. They didn't know how to be one. They didn't know what to do. And then they're placing the role models that are not good role models. Should I be doing this? Should
Exactly.
I be doing that? One of the things that they often do, these big guys that's come in often, you know, in a prison, they start talking, and within a few seconds, they burst into tears, literally floods of tears, because it's the first time they've ever had like a conversation.
Exactly. I had the first time, one of the first times I had my pastor many years ago. He preached a sermon and it touched me so personally. I went up to the altar and I felt, now I'm much bigger, he was probably up to my chest, but I
Yeah,
fell in his arms and bursted out into tears because it said, somebody actually heard me.
yeah,
Somebody actually feels what I feel. It's 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 freeing to know that you're not suffering alone. It's
yeah,
and I just challenge all people to really allow themselves to live their truth and not listen to the noise around them because the
yeah.
noise around you has different motives and intent. Your truth is here, not out here.
Yeah, definitely. Todd, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. I could talk to you for
Yeah,
absolutely hours. I love the things you got to say. I love all the things that you've done. So impressive what you, from 5 years of age, all the
mhm.
things you've done and gone through, overcome to what you do now, the way you help
Thank you.
people. Absolutely fantastic. And genuine pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so
And
much.
no, I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you for your genuineness and the freedom and actually just asking the questions and making me also this isn't scripted. So each time I'm learning as well too and becoming more clear and more distinct and my truth. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.